Hi, my name is Dave, and I'm about to share why I'm sitting in my kitchen at 2:30 p.m. on a weekday, a time I'd normally be at work. To explain the 4 phone calls and 1 text I've made since I got here 2 hours ago, 1 hour and 45 minutes stewing, 15 minutes of action, I need to tell you what led me to potentially ruin several lives. But hang on, someone's at the door. Oh hi, sweetie. Where's Fiona? I called Stuart, and he came home early. He'll pick her up from kindergarten and look after her until I get back. Linda, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. He's a great guy. I know it's traditional for a man to dislike his son-in-law, but you chose so well that I just can't help but like him. I chuckled at my daughter's grim smile. We share a similar sense of humor. Have you told Pete yet, Dad? No, your brother's at sea. I'll email him later. Okay, Dad. I'm here for you, you know that. Yeah, thanks, sweetie. We fell into silence for a long moment. Why would she do this to you, Dad? I don't know, darling. Didn't she say anything? I haven't actually spoken to her yet. You mean she's still? Yep. I watched as my daughter's troubled eyes flicked towards the stairs leading up to the master bedroom. I just wanted to wait so she could explain herself to all of us at the same time. All? Yeah, I've invited a few more guests. They should be here shortly. What are you going to do? No more and no less than what I have to, just to survive this. So you already have a plan? Yep. Doesn't it depend on her reason? Why? The facts speak for themselves. The reason is irrelevant. But she might have been blackmailed. Believe me, if you saw what I saw and heard what I heard, you'd know she wasn't being blackmailed. Linda looked into my eyes for a moment. I thought you were handling this well, but now I see you're not, are you? No. I turned away. No daughter should see her father cry. What would you like me to do? Do what your conscience tells you to do. I won't think better or worse of you, no matter what you decide. Thanks, Dad. Do you have any idea why she would do this? I have absolutely no idea, sweetie. I thought we had a good marriage until this morning. What happened this morning? Your mother has always been terrible at lying and keeping secrets. It's just not in her nature. After 27 years together, I know her routines like my own. She showers every morning. Every Tuesday and Friday, she washes her hair. She takes 5 minutes more or less than an hour to get ready on those days. Every other day, she's done in 5 minutes more or less than 30 minutes. This morning, she was in there for almost an hour and a half. When I went in to tell her she would be late for work, I noticed her underwear and what she was planning to wear. It wasn't her usual office clothes. I asked her about her plans, and she said nothing unusual, just work. She was lying. Usually, when she's running late, she gets agitated. This morning, she was as cool as a cucumber. I knew then that she had no intention of going to work. So what did you do? I called off work and parked just up the street. I was going to follow her when she left, but she didn't go anywhere. I stayed until that guy she works with at the real estate office showed up around 11:30. I crept in, confirmed my suspicions, and then decided what to do next. After that, I made a few phone calls, and here we are. Were there any clues, Dad? I mean, before today? I thought you guys were good. No, sweetie, nothing. As far as I knew, I loved her, and she loved me. We planned to work a few more years, retire, and live happily ever after. Dad, I have to ask you this. Did you ever? Don't even say it, Linda. No, I have never betrayed your mother. I have never disrespected a woman like that in my life. Even when our sex life pretty much died a couple of years ago, I just sucked it up. What? You haven't had sex in 2 years? Nope. Your mother was never very sexual. She said she just didn't enjoy it that much. Sure, she seemed to enjoy it when we started, but getting started was the problem. When she hit menopause 2 years ago, whatever I used to get just dried up completely. So when you found her today, it must have hit you hard? I let my steely gaze answer for me. Just then, there was another soft knock on the door. I opened it to see my father-in-law standing there. "Come in, Paul." "Thanks, Dave." "Where is she?" "Upstairs in our bedroom." "Okay. I have to see for myself." "I understand." "Go ahead, sir. Just don't disturb her, please." The old man went up the stairs and came down a minute later, looking much older. He slumped in a chair, and I poured him a whiskey, which he gulped down. "I can't believe she would do that to you. She knows how devastated you were when that fiancé of yours cheated on you. She helped pick up your pieces after all. Not only that, she knows how devastated I was when I caught her mother, and she ran off with that shithead, abandoning me and the kids. Sorry, I have to get out of here. It's tough seeing your granddad cry too." I escorted him to the door, with Linda starting to follow, but I gestured for her to stay back. I wanted to preserve whatever pride the old man had left. He stood on the porch, gripping my shoulders for support. "Do what you need to do, son, but no physical violence, all right? I couldn't bear to witness that." "Don't worry, Dad. I won't lay a hand on your daughter. But as for everything else, I apologize for what I'm about to do to your daughter. A man's gotta do what he's gotta do." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. He shuffled to his car and drove away slowly, a broken man. I called his son, my wife's brother, and hinted he should check on his dad, offering support without delving into details. Just as I hung up, I heard the toilet flush upstairs. Nap time must be over. I rejoined Linda, and we sat in silence for a few minutes. Soon, we heard a bed creaking and muffled sounds of passion. "See, Linda? Does that sound like blackmail to you?" "No, Dad. How can you sit here? Why not go up and confront them? Kick that woman out?" "Well, it's not easy, sweetie, but I have a way of shutting off my emotions. I can disconnect myself from the feelings." "Oh, is that where I get it from? So why torture yourself? Why not go up there and put an end to it?" There's one more visitor expected. Right on cue, another knock came at the door. I opened it to find a reasonably dressed woman a few years younger than me, accompanied by a boy and girl who looked to be in their mid-teens. "Mr. Brown, is it?" "Yes, please call me Dave. I'm Jenny Smith, and these are my kids, Robert and Sarah. I picked them up from school. If what you say is true, I wanted them here, if only to understand that their father is the one who tore our family apart." I shook hands with Robert, who surprisingly had a firm grip. I introduced him to Linda. "You mentioned you have proof, Dave." In response, I walked over to the pants lying on the couch and pulled out a wallet, handing it to Jenny. She opened it and examined the driver's license inside. A tear slipped from her eye, betraying a hope that what I'd said might be wrong. Her expression hardened abruptly. "Well, Dave, where are they?" I gestured for silence and we all sat, listening to the unsettling sounds from upstairs. "Damn it. You haven't confronted them yet?" "No, I thought we should do it together. I've recorded some video evidence for us to review. I also placed a voice recorder under the bed. We can go now if you're ready. I suggest the kids wait until we can get the, participants presentable." "Yes, you're right. Just hold on a moment. I have a locksmith on standby to change the locks at my place. I wanted to be sure before giving them the go-ahead. I'm not entirely surprised. This isn't the first time. He's a smooth-talking little jerk." Linda and I waited patiently while Jenny made her calls, organizing the locksmith and her lawyer. We kept her children occupied with mundane chatter to distract them from the noises upstairs. Finally, Jenny squared her shoulders and prepared to confront the situation head-on. "All right. Let's do this." Jenny, Linda, and I ascended the stairs while the kids remained downstairs, waiting for our signal. After Jenny cautiously peeked into the room, I motioned for the others to stay out of sight and entered alone. Standing at the foot of the bed, I watched the scene with a mix of disgust and betrayal. What had been a straightforward encounter before, missionary, had now transitioned to a more intimate position. He was now behind her, and she moaned appreciatively, a position she had refused with me since shortly after our wedding, claiming it was demeaning. Suddenly, she climaxed with a cry and collapsed onto the bed. He allowed her a moment to recover, then resumed his actions, oblivious to my presence. "Stop, John. I'm sore. Let me finish you with my mouth," she said, a gesture she hadn't extended to me since her injury. As she turned onto her back, our eyes met. Her expression turned from surprise to horror, and she screamed. Following her gaze, John saw me and hastily began to rise, his composure crumbling with his erection swinging freely. "That's right, you piece of shit," I said, meeting his gaze with a cold stare. "I'm bigger, uglier, and a whole lot angrier than you. Get back in that bed and cover yourself and my ex-wife." He complied without a word, and within moments, they lay side by side under the covers. I noticed Tracy's expression shift from shock to defiance. I let her speak first. Dave, I want a divorce. I've fallen in love with Joe, this guy here. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. We were going to tell you tomorrow." "That's fine, dear. By the way, I was bound to find out his name was John Smith eventually, right?" I could see the realization hit them both. "Not the brightest move leaving your wallet downstairs in your pants pocket, shithead. Tracy, out of idle curiosity, why did you choose to end our marriage this way? Did you not realize how devastating it would be for me to catch you cheating?" Finally, I saw a flicker of shame on her face. "I'm sorry, David. We couldn't help falling in love." "I understand that, dear. But you could have at least had the decency not to sleep with this prick before telling me you wanted a divorce." "I'm sorry, David. I just needed to be sure that John and I were compatible, you know. We didn't want you to catch us. For what it's worth, this was the first time." "What? Test driving the new model, huh? Trying him out for size?" "Don't be crude, David. I don't want our marriage to end in a fight. Can't we part as friends?" Her attempt almost broke through my mental defenses. It seemed rehearsed for our planned discussion tomorrow. "You've got to be kidding me. You lie here in our bed with another man's scent still on you, and you want to part as friends? No chance." We locked eyes until Tracy finally dropped hers. It was time to level the emotional playing field. "Your father asked me to let you know how disappointed he is in you. He had hoped you wouldn't turn out to be as unfaithful as your mother." "I can't believe you." Tracy's face drained of color. "I did. I'm surprised you didn't see him. He was standing right here not half an hour ago." "Why?" "Because, bitch, I wanted you to start feeling some of the pain I've been feeling since that idiot showed up. I don't know what the kids will make of all this." "Oh God, Dave, please don't tell the kids. Please." "Sorry, dear. It's too late." At that precise moment, Linda stepped into view in the doorway. Tracy glanced over at the movement, squealed, then buried her face under the sheets. "Don't bother, Mom. Pretending won't change a thing." Tracy remained under the sheets, moaning, while her bed partner shifted uncomfortably. "When Dad called me, I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I couldn't believe you would do this to him. Now I understand why he called. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I might have pleaded with him to forgive you. But seeing you like this, I know that's never going to happen." Silence, interrupted only by Tracy's deep sobs, was the only response. "Well, Mother, if you have nothing more to say, then I'll say it all. We won't need you to babysit your granddaughter this weekend. In fact, if cutting you off from her will protect her from your toxic influence, then you can forget ever seeing her again." A pitiful noob came from under the sheets. Linda was sobbing now herself. "You should have seen the devastation on poor old Granddad's face earlier. You crushed him." She turned to leave, but I caught her and hugged her. She pulled away and ran downstairs. Shortly after, we heard the front door slam. It was a couple of minutes before Tracy reappeared, her eyes red from crying. "Why did you have to do that, David?" "Because, Tracy, you haven't felt even half the pain I have. You haven't felt like your heart's been ripped out and stomped on. But you will, I promise you that. Now, I'm done with this charade. Get the hell out of my house, both of you." Defiance flashed across Tracy's face. "If anyone's leaving this house, it's going to be you. I used the power of attorney you gave me, just in case something happened to you, to transfer the deed into my name only." The forcefulness of her own words seemed to surprise Tracy. She could see from my expression that revealing another betrayal only fueled my anger further. Morally, she was digging herself deeper. I recovered quickly. The strange thing about shocking news is that it stops hurting when it reaches a certain point. I reached that point 2 hours ago. "How are you going to afford the mortgage, Tracy?" "You think we didn't plan this, David? With my salary, commissions, and John's income, we can easily cover it." "What paycheck is that, Tracy?" "Your boss, Mr. Johnson, wanted me to inform you both that you're fired. He would have delivered the news himself, but apparently, both your phones were off. Being the good Christian soul he is, he took a dim view of two married cheaters like you conducting affairs during company time." "You didn't tell him, Dave. Please tell me you didn't." "Yep. Sent him some lovely photographs, too." Tracy's bed partner finally spoke up. "How do you know I'm married?" "Driver's license, phone book, telephone, easy. Wife Jenny, about 5 feet 6 inches, pretty, red hair. Children, Robert and Sarah. Tell me, were you planning to screw them over like Tracy was planning to screw me?" "Please, Mr. Brown, don't tell my wife." "Why not? Haven't you emptied all your bank accounts yet, getting ready to sail off into the sunset with my wife?" "She was going to get the house. Just give me a chance to break it to her gently, please. She doesn't deserve this. I still love her in my own way. She doesn't deserve to find out like this." "What, doesn't deserve to find out like I did, you mean?" "Yes, you're right. Unfortunately, it's too late. I didn't need to turn around to know exactly when Jenny and her children entered the room." His face said it all, the shock and guilt were written all over it. "Yes, it's way too late, my darling husband," Jenny said, her voice trembling. "I'll forever be grateful to Mr. Brown here for bringing this to my attention. Just so you know, the video he's giving me should be enough to trigger the post-nup we had drawn up last time I forgave you." Tracy glanced at her bed partner, her face a mix of betrayal and realization that their financial plans were now ruined. "The locks on my house should have been changed by now. If you want to come by in the morning to collect your things, they'll be in the dumpster I'm renting this afternoon." Throughout Jenny's outburst, John stood looking at his feet, horror etched on his face. Later, I learned that he had initiated the affair with Tracy, but the test drive had been her idea. His plan had been to confess to his wife and family the next day. He looked briefly at Jenny, then glanced at his kids, unable to meet their gaze for long. Jenny was struggling to maintain composure but managed to address her children. "Well, kids, if you ever wondered what a cheater looks like, take a good look." Tracy cringed under their combined stare. Jenny grabbed the kids and stormed out. I approached the bed, glaring at the cowering couple. "Just get out of my house. You have no idea of the rage I'm feeling right now. I'll be back in a couple of hours. I expect you both gone by then. Tracy, don't even think about trying to screw me over. If you do, your chances of living happily ever after, scratch that, your chances of living, period, will go from very, very slim to non-existent. Understand?" One glance at my expression conveyed the seriousness of my intentions to them. I hurried after Jenny and intercepted them before they left. We agreed to meet at a nearby coffee shop, where we sought solace in each other's company. We comforted one another and tried to help the kids navigate the difficult times ahead. Robert showed remarkable maturity for his age, consoling his tearful sister. I deeply wished her father could witness the pain his daughter was enduring. I gave Jenny my contact details and offered assistance in any way possible. We parted on amicable terms, or so I believed. The following week was grueling. While I could detach emotionally during crises, the pain lingered beneath the surface. Work and legal matters consumed my days. The lawyers were particularly interested in the evidence I had, especially the voice recordings retrieved from under the bed. They captured incriminating conversations where the lovers discussed their elaborate plans to secure the majority of both households' assets. Tracy justified this as her entitlement due to my higher income potential. While divorce proceedings typically aimed for an equal division of assets, my lawyer informed me that evidence of premeditated actions often swayed judges to favor the affected party. Linda insisted on hearing the recordings as well. We were both shocked by her mother's calculated malice. Linda attempted to confront her mother for an explanation, but received nothing to absolve Tracy of her perceived malevolence. I maintained a brave facade for Linda and a composed voice when speaking to my son over the phone, but inwardly, I struggled. The weekend after the confrontation, I received a welcomed call from Jenny. She was cheerful about mowing her lawn, but confessed to being clueless about the mower's mechanics. After giving her a tutorial and helping with some minor maintenance, I stayed for dinner. We continued chatting after the kids went to bed, the conversation turning serious. "How are you holding up, Jenny?" "As well as can be expected, Dave. Thanks for asking. I think I've been mentally preparing myself for this for years. Deep down, I always knew something like this might happen again. My lawyers uncovered his financial plans and managed to block them all. I couldn't believe he planned to leave us virtually penniless. The nerve. My legal team says I'll get the house, child support, alimony, and about 90% of the assets thanks to your evidence and the post-nup. Glad I could be of assistance, Jan." My lawyer mentioned something similar, but with a split closer to 50 to 70%. He came crawling back 2 days ago, begging for forgiveness. I think his lawyers scared him with the same information mine gave me. The thought of being financially ruined terrifies him. I told him to get lost. The only concern I have now is how this will affect the kids. Sarah might be at an age where she can cope without a father figure, but I worry about Rob. I understand, Jan. At his age, Rob needs a strong male role model. I've been thinking about that. Can I step in? I would be honored to be there for him and offer support wherever I can. There was a long pause, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. I understand your pride might be fragile right now, Dave, so I don't quite know how. Don't worry about that, Jan. Right now, I'm just offering to support Rob however I can. Relief flooded her face, and we discussed the details for a while longer. And how about you, Dave? How are you holding up? I honestly don't know, Jan. I'm still reeling. I don't understand what I did to make Tracy hate me so much. Finding her with John, it just shattered me. It makes me question my own worth as a man. Was I so inadequate that? I just don't know. Ruining her relationships with her children, her father, possibly our mutual friends, and getting her fired, none of it feels like enough. I still feel like I'm only half a man. I understand how you feel, Dave, Jenny said, staring at me intensely as she weighed her words. Finally, she continued, you know what you need to do to reclaim your sense of self, right? I nodded, meeting her steely gaze. Yes, I do, Jen. Good, she replied firmly. How far are you comfortable with me going, Jan? I asked, sensing her resolve. Her voice matched her determined expression. As far as you need to go, Dave. Don't let lingering pain mess with your life. Let it all out. Okay. I'll need an alibi, I said. You'll have one, believe me, she assured me. When she outlined her plan for the alibi, we both burst out laughing, a much-needed release. After regaining our composure, our conversation continued. What about you, Jen? Do you feel like you need revenge on Tracy? I asked. Good Lord, no, she replied with a shake of her head. I know how charming he can be. Your wife never stood a chance. I almost pity her. We parted as friends, and Jenny promised to talk to Rob about helping me restore an old car. He agreed, and that marked the beginning of a routine for the next 6 weeks. After school, he'd come over to my place, and we'd tinker around in the garage. I used these times to impart values, and we developed a strong bond. However, my evenings were dedicated to observing John and Tracy. With our bank accounts frozen by lawyers, they couldn't afford their own place. Tracy stayed with a friend, while John did the same elsewhere. They spent most evenings together before parting ways late at night. Eventually, I discerned their routine well enough. One Thursday night, I called Jenny and informed her that the next evening was the night. She arranged for her kids to stay with her parents. I parked in her driveway, kissed her farewell with her encouragement, then wheeled John's old motorcycle out through the back gate and started it a block away from her house. Later, at John's friend's place, I surveyed the area and quietly disabled a street light with my air pistol. Concealed in the bushes by the driveway, I waited. John surprised me by arriving in a cab 40 minutes later, clearly intoxicated. King-hitting wasn't my style, but a sense of justice demanded a confrontation, fair, or as fair as the situation allowed. As he stumbled down the driveway, I stepped forward to face him. "Hey, John." He froze, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes in the dim light. His response wasn't what I expected. Dutch courage, they call it. "Well, if it isn't the guy who couldn't keep his woman in check." That was a grave mistake. Instantly, my carefully planned restraint vanished. The beast of betrayal took over. A right hook to the jaw sent him crashing to his hands and knees. The details after that are blurry in my memory. According to later accounts, I kicked him in the ribs several times, stomped on his kidneys and legs, and delivered a series of targeted blows between his legs. A few can loosely mean anywhere from 3 to 10, I suppose. Thankfully, the red haze lifted just enough for me to execute the final part of my plan. I dragged his unconscious body and left him sprawled in the middle of the road. Perhaps the police would mistake him for a random hit-and-run victim. Perhaps not. I returned to the motorcycle and rode to a nearby shopping center. In the shadows, I changed clothes and disposed of them, along with my gloves, in a dumpster. Finally, I pushed the bike back a block away from Jenny's house. Jenny was eagerly waiting for my return, probing for every detail of what had transpired. Surprisingly, she didn't seem perturbed that my actions had surpassed our plan due to my rage. Upset people don't usually grin like Cheshire cats. Once she had all the gritty specifics, I excused myself to shower and eliminate any potential evidence. Checking my knuckles for bruising, I found them intact. As I rinsed my hair with closed eyes, I felt a cool breeze followed by warm skin. Arms wrapped around me from behind. "I thought you weren't up for this," I said. "To hell with what I want. You needed this. You've dealt with the man, now you need to take his woman." I spun around, and we kissed passionately. It was exactly what I needed. When we finally pulled apart, she spoke. "Besides, when the police come to check your alibi, I want to be as convincing as possible. Now, finish up, you big lug, and get into the bedroom." Who was I to refuse a lady's request? Still damp, I tossed her onto the bed and claimed her. Normally, I take pride in my tenderness as a lover, but not tonight. I took her as fiercely and passionately as I could manage, and she seemed to revel in it. I woke up in the pre-dawn light to feel her slip back into bed, snuggling close. "I'm sorry, Jen. I was exhausted last night." "I hope you weren't too disappointed," I said. "If that was you in second gear, God help me if I ever get your third." "Let me show you," I said, and proceeded to bring her to climax orally before making love to her gently several times. Afterward, we both dozed off again. I awoke to breakfast and coffee being delivered. "Hey, Dave, some jerk smashed the back window of your car last night." "I've already called the police," she said, winking at me. Sure enough, the police arrived soon after, having traced my car's number plate in their system to a reported incident of assault the previous night. Fortunately, my alibi and I were together in a house that unmistakably smelled of sex. Our nosy neighbor corroborated our story about my car being parked there at the time of the assault, a regular occurrence on my weekly visits, though she didn't realize I hadn't been in the spare room as usual. I was never seriously considered a suspect. I did encounter Tracy one more time, about a week after her lover's rough night. She called to inform me she was coming over to collect her remaining belongings. When I explained they had all been donated to charity, she insisted on talking anyway. As I watched her pull up in her car and stand outside speaking on the phone, I answered the door in my dressing gown. She frowned at my choice of attire, but I maintained a neutral expression as I invited her inside. Politely, I asked her to surrender her phone and handbag, which I placed in the spare room and closed the door. She was wise enough to suspect I might be wary of her recording our conversation, though given what she was wearing, concealing a recording device on her person was out of the question. We settled at opposite ends of the kitchen table. Dave, I've arranged with a friend that if I don't call within 60 minutes, she'll notify the police, Tracy began cautiously. I nodded in acknowledgement of her precaution but remained silent. There was only one thing I needed to say, and it could wait. Dave, could I just say how sorry I am for how our marriage ended? She started. Save your breath, Tracy. I'm not interested in sitting here listening to you justify why you tried to destroy me, I interrupted firmly. The look on her face was a mix of surprise and disbelief, as if she couldn't quite recognize the man sitting before her. Okay, Dave. It was you who beat up John, wasn't it? She asked, trying to piece it together. Yes, I replied simply. Her reaction was immediate, caught completely off guard by my admission. What? She exclaimed, clearly expecting denial. What's so difficult to understand, Tracy? You asked if I beat up Shithead, and I said yes. It was me, I clarified. But why? He never did anything to you, she protested. Come on, Tracy. Even extramarital sex couldn't have dulled your reasoning that quickly. When I saw you with him, it shattered me. It emasculated me, destroyed my confidence as a man, made me doubt my ability to satisfy a woman, and stripped away my pride, I explained bluntly. She was visibly shocked, perhaps realizing for the first time the deeper impact of her actions. That's the consequence of cheating, you know. After a while, I realized I had two choices. I could end up like your dad, a sad, lonely old man, a hollow shell. Or I could fight back against the corner you and your lover pushed me into. Does it surprise you that I chose the path that allowed me to retain my dignity as a man? Does it? Yes, I took down your boyfriend, and if I need to do it again to hold my head high, then I will. You forced this confrontation, Tracy. There can only be one survivor. To prevent you and him from destroying me, I have to take you both down. The words were delivered with a calm, chilling certainty that brooked no argument. But I hope that by isolating me from friends and family, and getting me fired, you were finished with me. John and I just fell in love, Dave. It was beyond our control. You remember what it's like to be in love, don't you? Yes, Tracy, I remember 8 weeks ago. But as I said then, falling in love may not have been your choice, but how you acted on it was. If you had come to me and said, Dave, I've fallen in love with someone else, I want a divorce, I would have been hurt, but I would have given you your freedom or fought to win you back. But by announcing your intentions the way you did, with cruelty and malice, you declared war on me. You betrayed everything I stand for and everything I believed you stood for. And now, Dave? Can you leave John and me in peace now that you've had your revenge? Yes, I think I can. If only because I can't think of anything else to destroy. Thank you, Dave. Don't be relieved, Tracy. You should worry about someone else. Huh? I've settled the score with Johnny Boy. But his wife hasn't begun with you yet. She's tough, trust me. At that moment, a voice floated down the stairs from the master bedroom. Are you coming back to bed, Dave? You promised me 6 orgasms a day and you're under quota. Who is that? Jenny. Tracy fled. I shouted a warning not to involve the police again as I climbed the stairs to find Jenny waiting, fully dressed. She held me until the tremors subsided. As for Tracy, she disappeared to distant places. I never sought her out or contacted her again. Like I said, Dave's the name, and I'm feeling great. I read somewhere that people who seek revenge against those who wrong them often find it hollow. Bullshit. It's the most effective cure for depression I've ever known. Enough dwelling on the past. My new life awaits. Jen and I never developed a romantic relationship. We did find solace in each other's company occasionally, but there was never a romantic spark to take it further. We remained good friends and supported each other. Together, we guided Rob and Sarah through their upbringing, ensuring they turned out well. I kept a respectful distance when potential boyfriends appeared in Jen's life and refrained from intruding until their relationships naturally ended. A few of them were wary of me, knowing I would hold them accountable if they hurt her. Before Jen's last boyfriend proposed, he sought my blessing, and I happily supported the union. The wedding was deeply moving, and in the absence of her father, Jen asked me to walk her down the aisle. It was at the wedding that Jen introduced me to an old friend of hers who had flown in. Having gone through my own journey of self-reflection and healing with Jen's support, I felt emotionally balanced enough to consider pursuing a normal relationship. I even joked about asking Jen to give me away at my own wedding someday. Why not? Without the closure I saw through confronting the two cheaters, I doubt I could have moved on and found peace. It was a necessary step for my own recovery. Hello. I'm Tracy, and my life has taken a sharp turn for the worse in the past 2 years. I may be able to justify my actions from back then, but explaining what I did last week will take some time. I'm sorry, I'll explain. Reflecting on my life with Dave, it was good but had grown stale. The only real joy left was my first granddaughter. When John started showing interest in me as a woman, I felt a surge of youthful excitement. He was attentive and caring, and he swept me off my feet. Deep down, I knew our relationship was wrong, but it felt undeniably good. Our connection progressed from conversations to dates, culminating in intimacy. Guilt never plagued me. By the time we crossed that line, I was already deeply in love with him, and he with me. We planned to leave our spouses and start anew. A friend of mine, Carol, had been through a bitter divorce where her ex took control of all assets, making legal defense difficult. Hearing her story, John and I took preemptive steps to secure our futures. While I wasn't sure how John's wife would react, I knew Dave wouldn't take it well. Despite our discussions about infidelity, I realized I had already crossed the line with John. I intended to give Dave whatever the courts mandated after our divorce, driven by a desire to protect myself from any retaliation. Carol also asked me if John and I had been intimate. While I hadn't found much pleasure in lovemaking recently, I needed to feel desired as a woman. Despite Dave's frequent requests for affection, I couldn't recapture the same passion I felt with John. If only that spark with Dave had remained, perhaps this entire mess could have been avoided. Anyway, Carol planted doubts in my mind. What if John had a small penis or didn't last long? When I did need sex occasionally, I wanted it to be satisfying, didn't I? At my stage of life, sex was more about emotions than just physical satisfaction. I didn't expect John to measure up to Dave. Dave was caring, gentle, and satisfying. This was what ultimately led to my catastrophic betrayal of my marriage. My first encounter with John served two purposes: to test him out and as a bonding experience before we faced emotionally challenging tasks in the coming days. If I'm honest with myself, I think I wanted to ensure John was fully committed so he wouldn't back out of our plans. Even then, I sensed he was somewhat weak. I know what you're thinking. Did I consider the risk of getting caught and Dave's potential explosive reaction? Did I think about the impact on my father and kids? The simple answer is no. I never expected to get caught, and if I did, I never imagined Dave's intense response. As for the rest, I just didn't think about it, okay? I never compared myself to my mother. I was too young when she left us for her to factor into my decisions. Considering all I lost, you'd think the sex with John was amazing. It wasn't. His penis wasn't small, but nowhere near Dave's caliber. He lasted a decent amount of time, but I found myself losing interest after a few minutes, which made it uncomfortable. I ended up faking enjoyment, just as I used to with Dave. Men and their egos, honestly. I still don't know how Dave found out about my one and only infidelity. It doesn't matter to me now. I was devastated when I saw the hurt in his eyes when he walked into the room. I tried to justify it to myself later, but I couldn't. He hadn't done anything remotely deserving of that. My guilt briefly turned to defiance, but that didn't last. The thought that my father witnessed my mistake and my daughter's disappointment crushed me. The look in John's daughter's eyes was almost as painful. I never knew my husband had such capacity for cruelty. When the hospital called about John's admission, I knew instinctively Dave was behind it. The doctors believed John's injuries, a broken jaw, concussion, bruised kidneys, 3 broken ribs, a cracked tibia, and shattered groin, were consistent with a hit-and-run accident. I knew better. That's why I called the police, giving them Dave's name and car license plate number. 2 days later, they told me he was no longer a suspect. That's why I stayed by John's side during his week in the hospital. I knew he needed my protection. Until 8 weeks ago, if you'd asked me if Dave was capable of such violence, I would have said no way. But in my old bedroom, for 15 minutes, I saw a glimpse of a new, monstrous Dave. A monster I had helped create. A monster capable of unimaginable cruelty. Yes, I just knew it was Dave. That's why, just before John was discharged, I called Dave and arranged to meet at our old house. This had to stop. Hadn't he gotten enough revenge? John and I were both destroyed. It was time to move on. Walking up to my front door filled me with sadness. I knew the conversation ahead would be difficult. How had I shifted from loving a man to seeing him as my enemy in such a short time? Before ringing the bell, I called Carol and instructed her to call the police if she didn't hear from me in an hour. Dave greeted me at the door in his dressing gown, which struck me as unusual. His face was devoid of expression as he invited me inside. When he asked me to hand over my phone and handbag, I regretted not thinking to bring a recorder. But deep down, I knew he would never confess to the assault. I stared at the familiar stranger I had known for over 27 years. I felt remorseful about how our marriage had ended. I hoped explaining why I had fallen for another man might ease his pain and soften his stance. But he shut me down immediately. He wasn't interested in reasons or justifications. His tone was harsh, and his face was unreadable. Who was this man? His demeanor and voice were unfamiliar to me. I was shocked when he casually admitted to beating up John. Hearing his justification only solidified why he had done it. It didn't alleviate my guilt at all. I hadn't fully understood why Dave harbored such intense animosity toward John until that moment. Dave's stern demeanor made it clear we were facing consequences, and judging by his expression, it wasn't over. Asking Dave if he remembered what love felt like was part of my prepared speech, hoping for some emotional connection. His response was like a dagger in my heart. How could a fundamentally decent person feel anything less than devastated by my actions? I knew I needed to leave. My question about future retaliation was to gauge how far his anger might extend. I hadn't considered John's wife as a physical threat until Dave mentioned it. In a sudden moment of insight, I imagined myself in her shoes. What would I do if someone had betrayed me as I had betrayed her? A chill ran down my spine when I realized she was upstairs. I fled, collected John from the hospital, and we both left town. Our divorces were finalized, and we received the paperwork at a P.O. box 2 towns away from my new home. Living anonymously, without friends, constantly looking over our shoulders, was incredibly stressful. Money was tight. We eventually found jobs in commission-only real estate, but it was a long struggle between paychecks. John and I rushed into marriage 6 months later, a decision I now regret deeply. In hindsight, it felt like we were 2 lost souls seeking validation for the pain we had caused, both to others and ourselves. Our troubles began innocently enough. John's remaining testicle had always been non-functional, leaving him unable to achieve an erection. We couldn't afford the necessary testosterone treatments, which made him moody, insecure, and jealous. A marriage built on infidelity from the outset is a recipe for constant struggle. His mood swings affected me deeply. A friend suggested hormone replacement therapy, HRT, which had helped her with a similar issue. Despite initial cost concerns, a doctor's visit swiftly resolved the problem. However, the estrogen tablets had an unexpected side effect, a resurgence of my libido. The doctor's smirk belied the reality of how destructive this would be in a marriage already strained by sexual dysfunction. I found myself more sexually charged than I had been in years with Dave. John refused my advances, leaving me to cope with my desires alone, hiding my vibrators to avoid setting him off. When a younger colleague at work began showing interest, I felt flattered and responded. Keeping our date secret was stressful, compounded by John's intense jealousy, far more challenging than Dave's had ever been. The first kiss with my colleague evoked a strong sense of déjà vu, a reminder of past mistakes I vowed not to repeat. I refused to cheat again. After much thought, I decided to confront John and explain my need to take a lover, emphasizing discretion and minimizing the impact on him. His silence seemed like reluctant acceptance. After a disappointing encounter with my new lover, who quickly fell asleep, I returned home to find John gone. Sirens in the distance signaled the tragic reality: he had taken his own life. Once again, my actions had led to a man's destruction. I braced myself for the repercussions I knew he had arranged, but all I found was a suicide note and a letter to his attorney. The suicide note, emailed to our friends, led to their swift abandonment. The letter to his attorney altered his life insurance and will, redirecting everything from me to his children. I am left reflecting on my repeated mistakes, realizing too late the consequences of tampering with a man's pride. The end.